$8,600 for one outboard that never had a drop of gas in it. And $22. That's what the outboard in your garage is worth if you drag it to the scrapyard this afternoon. Same brand, built 10 years apart. The gap between those two numbers is everything. Third time I've run this valuation formula, and it works here like it worked on the reels. We start at the bottom, with the motor under a tarp in half the garages in America, and climb to the ones that clear 5 figures on paper. Every entry gets a tell you can check in 10 seconds with a flashlight, and there's one hidden factor at number 1 that decides whether yours is worth $30 or $10,000. It isn't the brand, it isn't the year, and it definitely isn't the horsepower, which I'm killing early because it's the most expensive wrong idea in this hobby. 2 words are going to come up at number 4, lower unit. Keep those in the back of your head, because they're the difference between a $100 Mercury and a $10,000 one. Before you read that plate, look at the transom you already own. A dead powerhead on a used boat that looked perfect is a $4,000 surprise, and the seller almost never eats it. That's the Outboard blacklist and buy list. Inside the bilge files with the inspection checklist, the $50 fix Bible, the electronics guide, the dealer playbook, and the hull rankings. $47 one time at hullhonest.com. Link below. Nobody pays this channel to point at a brand, which is why that list names names. Now go get the flashlight. The 2-tier frame first, because nothing else makes sense without it. This market splits clean in 2. Millions of post-war production motors worth pocket change on one side, a few thousand racing engines and Pioneer motors worth real money on the other. Telling those piles apart is the whole game, and almost every seller either can't do it or pretends he can't. Here's the floor. Cast aluminum scrap runs around 68 cents a pound on the national average this year. A typical 1950s 5 to 10 horse outboard weighs 40 to 60 pounds, mostly cast aluminum. Do that arithmetic and you get $20 to $40. A 2-horse kicker is closer to 15. That number sits under every motor on this list, and an enormous number barely clear it. Now the myth, because it poisons every swap meet conversation. Horsepower is not value. The Lando Lakes Classic Boat Club puts it bluntly, a 1950s Johnson the 450 horse is not worth $1 per pound. Bigger isn't rarer. Bigger is heavier, harder to ship, and harder to sell. The small motors are the ones that climb. That brings us to number 6. And it's the one you actually have. Number 6 is the common post-war small twin, Johnson Seahorse 3-horse, Evinrude Lightwin, a TD20. Green paint, pull rope, tank on top, parked in a shed since the Reagan years. Reality check before you get excited. The consensus on the iBoats forums for a 1960s Seahorse 3-horse is $100 to $200. Tops. They're great little motors, and there are lots of them around, so they aren't rare and they aren't valuable. One member sold a 50s 5-horse non-runner with a leaking carburetor for about $100, and said he had a hard time even doing that. That's the honest band. $50 to $250 running, sold in person. Here's the tell. The plate lives on the transom mount bracket or the swivel bracket, and there's a backup serial stamped on the powerhead core plug under the cowl. Write down both before you touch anything. On a Johnson or an Evinrude built in 1980 or later, the model number carries the year in code, and the code is a word. Introduces. 10 letters, no repeats. I is 1, N is 2, T is 3, R is 4, O is 5, D is 6, U is 7, C is 8, E is 9, S is 0. Find the 2 letters right before the last letter and translate them. J70TLEIA gives you E and I, so 9 and 1, so 1991. The serial number does not carry the year, only the model number does. From 1969 to 79 the year sits in the model number in plain sight. Before that, the system falls apart and you need an OMC serial range chart. One more tell, because it separates a $50 motor from a $200 one. Johnson's TD was the Twin Deluxe, and per the Antique Outboard Motor Club, it's one of the most common old outboards in existence. The TS, the twin standard, was offered mainly in 1941 and 42, and it's genuinely scarcer. Same silhouette, different letter. Go read yours and put the model number in the comments. I read those, and I can usually tell you inside a line whether you've got a shed ornament or something worth a phone call. Number 5 is where the fake money lives, and it's the 1950s styling premium. The Art Deco cowls, the Jet Age colorways, the fire hat Mercury with the red cap. These sell on looks, and the buyer often isn't a boater. He's furnishing a bar or a garage wall. Dealers like AFA Marine sell these fully restored, correct colors, reproduction decals, in a band running roughly $500 to $2,500. I'll be straight with you, because the sharp guys in the comments always are. That's an asking price. It's a shelf number from a dealer who did the work himself and eats storage until it moves. It is not what your barn find liquidates for out of a driveway. 2 things crush that gap. First is freight. A small outboard shipped ground runs $60 to $180, and a big one by commercial carrier can pass $1,000. On a $150 motor, freight doubles the buyer's cost, so heavy common motors are only ever worth their local market. Second is that this tier gets worked. Reproduction decal sets cost $10 to $85. So a rattle can and a correct decal sheet turns a common motor into a pristine survivor in one weekend, and the photos never show the difference. Then there's the language. It ran the last time it was put away. With fresh gas, it'll fire right up. Those are the standard hedges, and after 20 years of ethanol in cork float carburetors, they mean almost nothing. Make the seller start it on video. Which brings us to the 2 words I planted at the top. Number 4 is Mercury Racing, the single biggest multiplier in the hobby. Caille built a lineage most owners can't read. The KG-7 Super 10 Hurricane ran from 1950 to 52, rated at 10 horsepower with an asterisk, actually making 16 to 18. It got an 8-port reed cage, where the KF7 had 4. Then came the Mark series, and the letter H on a Mark 20, 30, 55, or 75 stands for Hurricane. A stock Mark 75H set a 107 mile-per-hour record in 1958. Here's the number that matters. Per the Lando Lakes Classic Boat Club, race models often fetch 10 times the value of a similar vintage standard model. 10 times. And they name the defining feature, the short tower housing and torpedo gear cases, built-in limited numbers. That's the lower unit. That's the whole thing. So the tell isn't the badge of the powerhead. Look at the leg. A real race Mercury wears a Quicksilver short drive shaft housing and a torpedo-shaped lower unit, and the plate will often carry a hand-stamped Q or H behind the model designation. The racing crowd on the Hydro Racer board says it plainly. No racing Quicksilver lower unit means your motor is neither a Q nor an H. It's a fishing motor, which is exactly why this tier gets faked. A race Merc is a fishing Merc with the right foot bolted on, so any parts pile with a scavenged Quicksilver lower unit becomes a 10 times motor by Saturday. Check the stamp on the plate, not just the shape of the leg. Now the myth I promised. The 6-cylinder Mercury Tower of Power has the best nickname in outboards and almost no collector value. Per the discussion on Scream and Fly, the collectors are older and they want engines light enough to throw in a car trunk. The Super Hurricane twins from the 50s bring more money than the 6 cylinders from the same era. Great nickname, dime a dozen. One flag before we climb. Peter Hunn's old outboard book put the Mark 55H between $150 and $750, and club members believe that's roughly doubled. Believe is the operative word. That's chatter, not a receipt. Quick thing while your flashlight's still on. I tear this industry apart exactly like this every week, and the list of things it hopes you never check does not get shorter. Subscribe, and you'll be standing next to me for the next one. Number 3 is the brass era, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. Pioneers, the Waterman Porto. A detachable rowboat motor that beat Evinrude to market in 1906. Ole Evinrude's own machines from 1909 on. Caille, spelled C-A-I-L-L-E, with the variable pitch brass propellers. Elto, his second company, the name standing for Evinrude Light Twin Outboard. Then a graveyard of names nobody outside the club remembers. Lockwood Ash. Coben Neptune the Tell is the tank and the flywheel, and it settles a dating argument sellers get wrong constantly. A genuine early Evinrude has a square brazed sheet metal fuel tank and a knucklebuster knob sticking off the flywheel. A curved aluminum tank with a rope start pulley is not a 1909 motor. Aluminum tanks didn't arrive until the 20s. That one detail moves a listing by thousands, in whichever direction the truth points. Now the uncomfortable part. Appraisal guides put 1909 to 1915 Evinrudes in a $2,000 to $8,000 band, and 20s rarities as high as $12,000. I went looking for the receipts, and what I found isn't what the title of this one implies. I could not find a single verified 5-figure hammer price for an outboard motor in the last 2 years. Not one. Those bands are estimates and asking prices. And the auction house you'd expect to anchor this? Meckham runs the largest road art sale in the country, and they sell outboard motor oil cans and outboard signage. They don't sell the motors. A Musco gasoline sign hammered at $230,000. 0 engines. Here's what verified sold looks like. Miller & Miller in Ontario sold a 1940s Evinrude Elto 3-horse for $400 Canadian, and a 1938 Johnson Seahorse LS38 for $700 Canadian. Richmond Auctions sold a restored Caille Liberty Twin for $150 and a Neptune Mighty Might for $50. That's the real transaction record. $50 to $700. And I know the pushback, because I'd make it too. You can pull up a listing right now with a brass motor at $8,000, so how can I sit here and say this market runs in the hundreds? You'd be completely right about the listing. It exists, but listed is not sold. The only prices that mean anything are the ones somebody actually paid, and when you filter to those, the brass era gets quiet fast. The club knows it. A member liquidating a friend's collection put it this way: a tough TD20 might be listed for $5 or $10 in Hun's book, but in reality, you cannot give them away. Clark Trollers, he said, sell for half what they did 10 years ago, because the people who care about this stuff are dying off and the younger generations can't connect to it. Roughly 3,000 members in the Antique Outboard Motor Club, and shrinking. Brass is the top tier, and the top tier is thin. Number 2 isn't a motor at all. It's the crate, and it's the biggest multiplier here. There's a 1947 Johnson KDL-15 listed at $8,600 or best offer. Never out of the box. Still in the original wooden shipping crate, with the manuals, the service station list, and the stenciling intact. A used running 5-horse from that era trades at $150 to $300. Run that division, and you land between 25 and 50 times. An Elto Pal from 1937, mint in its original carrying case with the tools, has been listed just under $12,000. A dented one with no case, running, changed hands for $130. And here's the honesty beat, same as number 3. That KDL has been relisted. It's an asking price, not a sale. So the honest version is that a crated unused motor asks 10 to 30 times a used runner, and the top of that range has never been confirmed by anybody's bank account. What creates the multiplier isn't the paint, it's the paper, the crate, the stenciling, the manual, the dealer list. That's the documentation proving nobody ever touched it. And documentation is the one thing you can't fake with a rattle can. It collapses 3 ways. A common motor stays common in a crate. A heavy one gets its premium eaten by freight. And if you can't prove unused, you don't have unused. You have clean. Perfect handoff into number 1. Number 1 is originality. The hidden factor I promised at the top. Not the brand. Not the year. Whether the motor is untouched. Patina beats heavy over restoration here, and it isn't close. The Lando Lakes Club says even novice collectors spot a bad paint job, missing parts, or poor workmanship a mile away. Over-restoration is worse than none, because it erases the only thing carrying the value. Pre-war Johnsons left the factory as dull, bare aluminum with the color only in the decals. So a pre-war Johnson painted green isn't restored, it's a creative restoration, and the club prices it that way. So the do not list. Don't polish it. Don't repaint it. Don't powder coat anything. Don't swap in a modern part because the original looks ugly. And don't throw out the crate, the manual, the tool roll, or the tag, because here the paper is worth more than the metal. Now the arithmetic that decides whether you restore at all. A magneto rebuild runs about $250, and a rebuilt OMC magneto retails around $209. A small twin powerhead kit with pistons, rings, gaskets, and bearings is $400 to $800. Decals are $10 to $85. You're past $1,000 before anybody's labor. On a motor worth $50 to $250. Restoring a common outboard is a hobby. It isn't an investment, and anybody who says otherwise is selling you the motor. So here's the formula. This is the part to write down. Start with the base, the honest liquid price for that horsepower and era. Common post-war twin, $50 to $250. Deco tier, a few hundred. Brass, higher but thin. Multiply by the race factor, up to 10 times, and only with a genuine Quicksilver torpedo lower unit and a stamped Q or H. No lower unit, no multiplier. Multiply by condition. Over-restored comes off. Correct professional restoration is roughly break-even. Original paint and running is a premium. Crated and documented is the 10 to 30 times outlier. Multiply by completeness, because missing cowls, cracked coils, and stripped clamp screws come off the top. Then subtract freight, because freight caps what any buyer outside driving distance will pay, and floor the whole thing at scrap weight times 68 cents a pound. So let's land where the evidence landed. The odds the motor in your garage is worth a fortune are poor. It's probably worth between $22 and $250, and I'd rather hand you that than a fantasy. But you weren't dumb for not knowing this. Nobody teaches you to read a plate. Nobody tells you the year hides in the model number and not the serial, or that the lower unit is worth more than the engine, or that a wooden crate is worth more than a restoration. An entire hobby quietly agreed to keep the tells inside the club, and the guys asking $8,000 for a repainted 20s motor are counting on you never checking. You can check now. Go read the plate. YouTube thinks you'll like this video, so click it. And if you made it all the way to the end, subscribe.